Welcome everybody. Oh, move closer to my mic. Welcome everyone to the Development Management Committee on 9th of July 2025, and welcome to those watching at home. There's no scheduled fire alarm, so if one goes off, it's for real. 2 exits in this room, one through the double doors, and one to my right here. And I have to remind everyone that we're being recorded, so use your mics. Introductions. I'm Councillor Stephen Watson, the Chair. Next to me is Councillor Joe Thomas, the Vice Chair. Over there is Steve Fraser-Lim, the Principal Planning Officer. To my right is Rachel Lee, Legal Advisor, and Peter Mannings, the Committee Support Officer. Can you hear me, by the way? Am I close enough to the mic? I have further to my left Martin Plummer, the Service Manager for Development Management and Enforcement, and I would like also to introduce the Council's Executive Member for Planning and Growth, Councillor Vicky Glover-Ward, over there, who won't be taking an active part in this meeting but is here in an observing capacity. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, just the one from Councillor Graham Hill, and Councillor Moira Connolly is his substitute for tonight. Thank you.
Well, Chairman's announcements are just to remind you again to use your microphones because we're being webcasted. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Right. Members, we have before us the minutes of the meeting held on 21st of May 2025. If we have no... Councillor Estop.
Chair, I'm recorded under apologies for absence, but I wasn't absent. I didn't take part to avoid any ambiguity about predetermination, and I'd prefer that to be recorded. I mean, I was present and I watched it from home, so.
Did you give apologies before?
Did you give it any apologies beforehand or explain?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll log that. Councillor Burt. Sorry, I thought you had your hand up there. All right. All right, if there are no other amendments, can we have a proposer for the minutes with that amendment that Councillor Estop mentioned, Councillor Stowe, and a seconder? Councillor Devonshire. In favour? And against? And any abstentions? Thank you. So, members, we have before us application 3/2021/0969/FUL, construction of a 50 megawatt battery energy storage system facility and associated access, landscaping and other infrastructure works at land at Greens Farm, East End, Stocking, Pelham, Buntingford, Hertfordshire. And I would like to invite Steve Fraser-Lim to present the application.
Thank you, Chair. Next slide, please. So we've got, this is a slide just shows Stocking, Pelham, the substation, and the context of the site. There are a lot of planning applications that have been submitted. Some have been determined, some are still being assessed through the planning system in the vicinity of Stocking Pelham substation. This plan has been submitted by Protect the Pelhams group, and we haven't measured the size of the colour sort of areas which are intended to depict the site areas. So I don't think they're necessarily 100% accurate, but it is useful in terms of showing the location of all the other applications that have been submitted or have been determined in the area. the blue line shows the district boundary between East Herts and Uttlesford District Council, and the application site that we're considering today is the purple battery sites just to the left of the substation. And members may recall the site we considered at the April Planning Committee for the battery storage site. That's the yellow one at the bottom of the picture there. And then we'll also be seeing some pictures of the substation, and there's an existing built battery storage system in Uttlesford, which is the sort of the red blob just above the substation. So members may be aware of that as well. The large yellow area is a solar farm development, which has been granted planning permission following appeal to the planning inspectorate. And the purple solar farm area is an application which has been submitted to Uttlesford, and they're currently considering that application, although there was a previous application which was dismissed, appeal dismissed by the planning inspectorate. The planning history is kind of set out in the committee report. Next slide, please. This is the application site area. So the main site compound for the development is located, that is the main sort of rectangular area at the front, at the centre of the site. The proposal also includes a construction access, which is the red line that snakes off to the left, to the west, which connects to an existing farm access on Gins Road. And then to the north is the proposed cable route, which would then connect with the substation. And then to the south are two further operational site accesses, one main one and one an emergency access, an additional route if required. Next slide, please. There are a number of roads and public right-of-ways in sort of vicinity of the site. So the blue and purple lines show the location of the public rights-of-way. There is one that passes immediately adjacent to the site, just to the west, on the western boundary of the site, and to the north as well. And there's various other public footpaths from which the site would be visible in longer distance views, which we'll sort of get onto in a bit. Next slide, please. These are photos from of the site. So this is the view from the public footpath looking south into the site itself. It's the agricultural field surrounded by existing hedgerows, and with the substation located to the east, to the left in that picture. Next slide, please. This is a view from the northwest corner of the site, again looking down from the public footpath. Next slide, please. And then this is the view from the public footpath looking northwards with the site, and then you can see the substation to the right there. Next slide, please. These views are from further away. So this is from the north, nearer to Crabs Green, and you can see the pylons where that first picture was taken, which is sort of looked into the site. So so you may have glimpses through those gaps there of the into the site. Next slide, please. This is a view from the cricket field in Stocking Pelham, and so sort of directly ahead you can see the sort of pylon in the distance next to some of the structures in the substation, and that's kind of where the site is there. So there may also be glimpse views from this location. Next slide, please. And this is the view from public footpath near to Gins Road. So this is looking eastwards, and the site would be amongst those pylons in the centre of the picture. Next slide, please. This is the view along Gins Road, and the construction site access would be just off to the left. Next slide, please. This is a view of the construction access, current field access point. Next slide, please. This is the view from the unnamed road through East End, and this is the proposed operational access, which would go through that point there and then would run along the left-hand side of the field to connect up to the site. Next slide, please. This is the view from that road, the East End Road, into Green's Farm, the farmyard. You can visible there with some of the other large buildings in the farmyard, and this is the secondary access that would go through this location, through the farmyard. Next slide, please. This is a view of the existing battery storage development, which is in Uttlesford, granted planning permission by Uttlesford District Council, and it's just to the north of the substation. So you can see the kind of general arrangement of these battery storage sites. The battery rack units are kind of look a bit like shipping containers, and you can see some of those behind the fences. And then you get these larger units, which are the transformers, which are sort of higher, with projecting above the kind of general other equipment. And you can see this site doesn't have any landscaping or acoustic mitigation, acoustic fences or anything around it. I'm not entirely sure why that hasn't happened. I think there were planning conditions requiring it, but for some reason they haven't been enforceable, and that's also a concern from local residents as to why that situation developed. It's not within East Herts though, it's the Uttlesford District Council. Next slide, please. The site, so just this plan just shows the site in a bit more detail. I'll just skip to the next one though, because I think it's a bit more clearer. Next slide. And this is the layout of the site. So on the northern side of the site is where the transformers are located, and then the battery racks kind of are arranged in rows as they're organised further to the on a north-south axis. The blue, I'm sorry, not the blue, the brown lines that are around that are the 3.5 metre high acoustic fencing which is proposed, and then the blue circular shapes are proposed water tanks to store water for firefighting in the event of an emergency. And the blue basin at the bottom of the site is the drainage basin, which would collect water from the site and then discharge into an adjacent watercourse at Greenfield runoff rate. And then the green areas around are landscaping. Next slide, please. Just moving on to some of the planning issues in relation to this site. The landscape visual impact is an important issue. There are significant landscaping proposals incorporated into the scheme. So you can see here that the boundaries of the site are proposed to be landscaped with some new hedgerow and tree planting. There'll also be wildflower meadow area in between the landscape boundary and the site itself, and as well as the sort of landscape wildflower strips on the edge of on the external edge of the landscaping adjacent to the public footpaths. Next slide, please. And these images show the potential for the proposed landscaping to mitigate landscape impact. So the top slide shows a year 5 situation with the fencing visible, and then the bottom slide shows the potential with when landscaping becomes established to reduce the visibility of the development. Next slide, please. These views, that shows the northern edge of the site. It's not possible to do significant planting underneath the pylons due to the requirements of National Grid. So there are lower level shrub plantings proposed in that location, but tree planting, hedgerows adjacent. Next slide, please. This is the fully established image. Next slide, please. The southern elevation in year 5, and next slide, please. And when established. Next slide, please. So in terms of the landscaping impacts, members would note that we do identify there is harm in terms of landscape impact, both in terms of the appearance of the site as well as the landscape character. And we've attributed moderate to minor harm in terms of landscape character as part of our a planning judgment and the planning balance. Also, another issue that's a concern identified in the committee reports is transport, in particular the routing of construction vehicles. So we've seen the location of the construction access, which goes from the site onto Gins Road. The proposed routing for construction vehicles is there are two routes. There's a northern route which from Gins Road travels north through Stocking Pelham and then can connect with the M11, and the southern route would then travel down Gins Road to connect with the A120. The southern route is not considered to be suitable for heavy goods vehicles, and so the northern route is proposed for heavy goods vehicles and the southern route for lighter goods vehicles. Next slide, please. There's a lot of comment and concern in relation to access for construction vehicles along Gins Road. And so this site, in a similar process to the application that was considered in April, has been subject to considerable review by the Highway Authority, County Council, in terms of the kind of potential pinch points and how larger vehicles will be able to get past. And a detailed construction traffic management plan has been submitted, which shows assesses that kind of route in detail and identifies the pinch points and mitigation measures, for instance, widening, cutting back vegetation to visibility sprays, relocation of manhole covers, and as well as signage. So a whole package of measures is identified along Gins Road to mitigate any sort of potential conflicts between construction vehicles and other traffic vehicles. And also the construction traffic management plan is a planning condition requiring the final version of that to be submitted, but that plan will also require that no more than 2 construction vehicles in connection with this site will be able to will use that route in each day, and that there will be the restrictions on timing so that it won't be able, the HGVs won't be able to use the route during the drop-off and pick-up times of the nursery in Stocking Pelham. This is a similar approach that was agreed with the Highway Authority on the other site that the planning committee was considered in April. Next slide, please. Another issue is noise. That members may note there was actually going back to that first slide, there was another battery storage site in East Herts which was recently refused primarily due to concerns around noise. So this isochrone plan just shows the kind of noise levels without mitigation surrounding the site, and then you can see the nearest noise sensitive receptors. So they're primarily houses on East End Road to the south, the bottom end of the slide. There are a further few houses to the north as well. The houses to the south are often screened by the large buildings within the farmyard. So you can see the sort of darker greens show the lower noise levels at those houses. So but this plan shows the modelling when with no mitigation. Next slide, please. And with the mitigation including the fencing, the proposal shows that the noise impacts are reduced. And then you can see that the kind of noise levels that are anticipated at the nearest receptors are generally below the background noise levels. The report does identify there are instances where the noise levels are predicted to be above background level. These are generally at night time, and with a further assessment, it's identified that outdoor spaces are not likely to be used at night time. Part of the assessment, that's after 11 PM before 7 AM, and that in terms of bedrooms and internal spaces within the houses, the attenuation provided by an open window, which is generally about 10 decibels, would mean that the noise levels at those nearest houses would be below background level and in line with kind of acceptable range. The noise impacts. The noise impacts have also looked at low frequency noise, because that's an issue in terms of the existing battery storage site. And that shows that without mitigation, the noise levels for low frequency are generally still below background level. There is one instance where it's 1.7 decibels above, but with mitigation, the fencing is reduced to below background level. So a better situation than other comparable sites that were recently considered by the council. Next slide, please. So yeah, that's the end of the images. I do have other images that members may want to look at, and also the first slide showing the other sites. I understand Protect the Pelhams may want to bring that slide back again. Just to draw members' attention to the final assessment within the committee report. So it's very much a planning balance judgment. There are harms that have been identified in terms of the landscape impact, but the legislation in PPF sets out that we have to give significant weight to the public benefits of renewable energy infrastructure, which we've set out in our planning balance assessment. There are some other smaller benefits in terms of biodiversity net gain, and so when we've weighed up the different considerations, the officer view is that the planning benefits of the development significantly outweigh the harms in this case and would justify recommendation for approval. I would just draw members' attention to the late rep sheet as well. There's been some further comments received, which our officer comment is provided there. There are also a small number of errata and amendments to the report. One of the main ones probably to mention is in terms of the applications which are happening around and about the site. We've taken those into account as part of the cumulative impacts of the development in terms of, particularly in terms of landscape. There is one application that was relatively recently submitted in Uttlesford. It's listed in our site is listed in the committee report as land at Maggots End, Uttlesford, where the solar farm was dismissed following an appeal to the planning inspectorate. But another application, and so because that appeal was dismissed, we've not the landscape officer at the time, there was no application, so the landscape officer didn't include that as part of the cumulative assessment. That application has now come in. We've highlighted that as in the late rep sheet. We've also considered the impact of that in terms of our the cumulative impact harm in terms of landscape, and the officer's view is that this application, whilst it does worsen the situation, it doesn't change the stated position in the committee report, which is that we identified a range of harm from moderate to minor, and this would then make the harm perhaps at the higher end of that range. Although this application is undetermined, so that would be, the harms would only arise if that application was allowed through the planning process. So that kind of reduces the weight we would allow for that application in terms of the cumulative assessment. There are just a small change to condition 5. We've been looking to try and see what we can do to provide greater certainty around the timing of the construction of these sites, so that construction vehicles are not, the sites aren't building out at the same time. Unfortunately, it's not something we can guarantee because of the sort of uncertainty, the different competing sort of considerations. But we are proposing an amendment to wording condition 5 to say that the phasing construction program that needs to be submitted as part of that condition should demonstrate how it's aiming to prevent conflict with other sites that are building out at the same time. The other comments are generally fairly minor. So that concludes the presentation. The recommendation is as set out in the committee report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now we have speakers Our first speaker is Sarah Yarrow from the local campaign group Protect the Pelhams. Welcome. So you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
So I'm a local resident, and I'm also part of the campaign group Protect the Pelhams, which represents over 250 local households in the vicinity. The Pelhams are amongst the most unspoilt villages in East Hertfordshire. Council's landscape character assessment of the Pelham Plateau notes that the area is gently undulating and predominantly used for arable farming, has a strong rural character with many village pubs, flint churches, a good rights-of-way network, and prominent scattered blocks of woodland. An electricity transformer station at Stocking Pelham and the associated high voltage power lines are a major eyesore in an otherwise mature landscape where cultural patterns are generally intact. The existence of this eyesore does not justify further attempts to fundamentally alter the character of the area by introducing more alien infrastructure. In April this year, the committee approved the construction of an industrial battery storage unit on land in Furnix Pelham. This is just one of 7, I repeat, 7 similar developments, either approved or submitted for approval within just 1 kilometre of the substation. Policy VIL2 requires that all development in rural areas should relate well to the village in terms of location, layout and connectivity, and be of a scale appropriate to the size of the village, having regard to the potential cumulative impact of development in the locality. National planning guidance on renewable and low carbon energy also states that local planning authorities must ensure they take into account potential impacts on the local environment, including from cumulative impacts. The views of local communities likely to be affected should be listened to. Best practice guidance does not require all developments to be visible from the same location. Combined effects can arise on a sequential basis. A dog walker who starts at Park Green would encounter all 7 developments during a 2-mile circular walk on local roads and footpaths. The cumulative visual impact of these 7 developments has received inadequate consideration. The officer's report notes concerns regarding cumulative visual impacts, wrongly concludes they are acceptable. The report fails to mention that the council's landscape officer comments that landscape effects should be major, moderate, adverse on completion, and there should be greater consideration for the impact of proposals upon the immediate setting of the site and the landscape and settlement pattern. The proposals would result in the coalescence of infrastructure development within the settlement of East End. Reliances upon assurances from the developer regarding the effectiveness of mitigation measures is naive. The chosen site has no screening. The hedging proposed in the planting is only 80 centimetres high and is likely to be bare-rooted. Young hedges require regular watering. Existing BESS adjacent to the substation illustrates clearly that young hedgerows are unlikely to survive and therefore provide no effective visual mitigation. The proposed planning condition requiring dead trees or hedges to be replaced as soon as is reasonably practical is toothless. While enforcement of planning conditions is a matter for the council, it is submitted that the enforcement team is not.
That's your time. If you
allow one more sentence.
One more sentence.
Thank you. The visual impact of this development on a standalone basis and in combination with the other 7 developments cannot be made acceptable. The application.
All right, I think that's enough.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, before you leave, does anybody have any questions to the speaker? Sorry. Nobody? All right, well, thank you. Next, we have, for the application, Neil Watterson of Cambridge Power and Gary Mattingly of Green Fire Solutions. And you're sharing the 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. I'm Neil Watterson from Cambridge Power on behalf of the applicant Pelham Power Division of Cambridge Power. And this is Gary Mattingly from Green Fire Solutions, who's here to answer any questions in relation to fire risk and public safety considerations. The application before you today is a sustainable development that will support the UK's transition and the Council's own climate change strategy, as well as improving our energy security and stability. The UK is moving at pace towards net zero and energy independence in an uncertain world, and this application is an opportunity to support that. We need a grid that supports the transition to low carbon energy, and our proposals are an efficient and appropriate means of doing just that. Battery storage has been specifically identified by the government along with National Energy System Operator as a key part of the strategy for decarbonising the energy network and achieving the UK's net zero commitments, with a fourfold increase in storage required by 2030. The benefits of battery storage systems therefore couldn't be clearer. That being said, we've been working tirelessly to address the concerns that have been raised, and making sure that our proposals avoid or minimise any impacts on the local community too. We are pleased to have a recommendation for approval, and it's important to recognise that the proposed scheme is policy compliant in every respect, and there are no objections on the application from statutory consultees. A lot of the work has gone into providing highways access, noise and fire safety information that further demonstrates the strength of this application. Whilst this is an application for temporary structures, there are permanent positive impacts for our planet and natural environment. For example, new hedgerows, wildflower planting and trees will result in a biodiversity net gain of over 44%. The applicants recognise fully that they have a responsibility to improve on where developers haven't got this right in the past. We know that noise has been an issue for the BES to the north, and this is why acoustic fencing is proposed to mitigate those impacts, and conditions are proposed to set criteria for us to adhere to so when the site becomes operational. Unlike the existing facility to the north, our site has mature landscaping on 3 sides, providing existing screening, and this will be supplemented by extensive new planting around the perimeter. Extensive work has been undertaken on the temporary construction access arrangements, working closely with the Highway Authority over the last few years to address their requirements around access and construction traffic. In short, we hope that members recognise not only the demonstrable benefits of this proposal, but the work undertaken behind the scenes over the last few years to get this right for the local community and our local natural environment also. And we hope that you can therefore support our application. Thank you.
Okay, members, do we have any questions? Okay, so I saw John Dunlop first.
Hi, thank you. I just wonder how long the batteries last, and will you have to replace them within the 40-year timescale that this application's in there?
It's evolving as battery technology evolves, but typically it's in the region of 10 to 15 years at the moment.
It's just that in the report in section 8.4, it talks about following completion of the construction, vehicle movements will be restricted to a small number of maintenance vehicle trips. Now, I imagine whenever you replace the technology, it won't be a small number of vehicle maintenance trips. You again will be employing HGVs and large vehicles to bring considerable battery storage, and I would imagine you would probably try and expand it at that time because the densities will be bigger and so on.
Well, any expansion would require a planning permission. So there's no plans for that. Who knows how battery storage may evolve? But in the main, it's a case of swapping out individual cells. In terms of any sort of larger scale replacement, that may require some further HGV movements. But obviously, most of the infrastructure will already be in place. A lot of the movements are associated with all of the things that go into making the site in terms of the putting in the access and also the groundworks and everything else. That will all be in place.
So I think it's fair to say then that whenever you do get round to the replacement phase, it won't be just light vehicles, it will be HGVs again.
Potentially, but the measures for that could be addressed within the construction traffic management plan in the same way that they're currently intended to be.
Yeah, I just want to recognise that that's the case because that's not what is stated in the officer's report. Thank you.
So, Councillor Copley next.
Thank you. I think there's obviously been a lot of discussion in the report and this evening about obviously landscaping and trying to protect the local community from that. I just know from my experience in my own ward with building, when there's landscaping put in place, trees do die and things need to be maintained, and it doesn't always go to plan. And I was just wondering what kind of plan you've got in place to make sure that any trees that did die will be replaced quickly, that things are maintained over the life, particularly like say the hedgerows, etc., but also the acoustic fencing, just to make sure there is something in place to deal with anything that needs to be replaced, etc.
As part of some of our previous submissions, we have submitted with detailed planting plans or the proposals already, which is not typical. Normally that would be left for a planning condition. And we've also provided a landscape management plan alongside that as well, setting out arrangements for how that would be managed and maintained, and setting out the replacement criteria for the different species. And that has all been considered by the council's landscape officer, and I don't believe there are any objections to that. So, but equally, there is the ability to enforce that through planning conditions. There will be a condition requiring adherence to the approved plans, etc., and they will be captured within that.
Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. I fully understand the need for BESS, but why are there so many battery energy storage systems proposed in this area? Quite a lot of the residents' objections are based around this cumulative impact of all of these, not only the BESS, but the solar arrays as well. Why is it all concentrated in this area? Can you tell me that?
The Stocking Pelham substation is a main substation within the UK. It's one of about 50 substations where it's effectively the intersection between the national transmission network and the local transmission network. So it's a very good entry point to the grid. It means that by connecting into that, you can support not only the national transmission network, but also the local one as well. So there's national and local benefits. And yeah, so it is proximity to that. I mean, I can't speak for other applicants. We were one of the first. We're right next to the substation. Our cable route is minimal to get to connect into the substation. So it is an ideal location in that respect. I do appreciate some of the concerns that have been raised around that. But in terms of storage in general, I go back to my point that the national NESO have a requirement for, they think there'll be a requirement for a fourfold increase in storage, and that is to support the transition to clean energy. Obviously, there's a target for to transition to clean energy network by 2030 now, and that to support intermittent renewable energy, you need storage alongside, because the wind doesn't always blow when you need it to, and the sun doesn't always shine when you need it to. So it's about making sure that you use storage to use that energy efficiently and effectively. And ultimately, that means that you probably need less energy production overall.
So, Councillor Burt. Thank you.
I note that there are quite a few concerns about the traffic. How long does it take to build a facility like this? So sort of the disruption traffic-wise, how long would that be?
So we have based our assessment on another site that we've been building in the past. We've set out a construction program for 9 months. It's very detailed in terms of how we've gone into that. So we think it's robust and realistic and reliable. And we've sort of set out the different phases within that, and the construction traffic we anticipate across that period. And it does, the nature of the traffic changes through that period. So it tends to be the early phase, the sort of first quarter, which is the busiest in terms of HGV movements. It then quietens down, but then some of the HGVs are larger vehicles that are carrying the the batteries or the transformers, etc. But there's less in terms of volume.
Mm.
So we've worked very hard. It's taken about 3 years working with the Highway Authority, and the application that got approved in April benefited from a lot of the work that we did in discussing that route and negotiating the nature of the mitigation with the County Council Highway Authority.
And then once that's done, very little.
Well, in terms of
Maintenance.
operational traffic, it's a maintenance van typically every other week. So that's the sort of, so negligible once it is operational. Although, take a point, if there is a need for a larger replacement, then specific circumstances can be put in place for that phase as well.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. There's been a lot of objections from the local villages, rightly so, a lot of concerns. And at first, Highways shared a lot of those concerns. But what's changed to dispel those concerns?
Councillor Smith, if you just a little bit closer to the mic, and Councillor Burt, you were a bit quiet as well earlier.
Yeah, so I'll start again. Highways shared some of those concerns, but something changed to dispel those concerns. I just wondered what that was. What's the main thing that's allowed this?
Okay, well, it's taken quite a long time to address the issues. We've made some changes to the access arrangements to the site. We provided more detail in relation to those access points and safety audits, etc., to support those. In terms of construction traffic issues, we have made modifications to the routing of construction vehicles. In following discussions with the County Council, we've actually made a few adjustments to that. And then we have provided a lot further information. We've done detailed surveys along the traffic route. We've done more detailed drawings of the whole route and looking at the mitigation requirements along the length of that route, setting out areas where additional passing places will be needed, where additional signage will need to be put in place, setting out restrictions on management arrangements for construction traffic, etc. So there's a lot of work that's gone into it, which is why this application was submitted in 2021 and we're only just at committee now. So, but I think it does emphasise how hard we've tried to work to overcome those issues.
Right, Councillor Estop.
Is it correct that your customer would be UKPN?
No, well, so the nature of storage, it will feed into the grid. The substation is mainly managed by National Grid, but as I said, it's an intersection between the sort of national and sort of local distribution network. So there is a UKPN compound within there, but it feeds into the grid as a whole, and it can be used as needed. It's ultimately National Grid that manage the network as a whole, but they work closely with UKPN.
Councillor,
And
sorry.
can I follow up? Sorry.
Yes.
Did you do the best to the north, the one that's been built? Is that Cambridge Power?
No.
No. Could you say where the electricity is going to come from? What is going to be supplying the battery storage? And is it built yet?
Well, it feeds directly into the grid. So we import energy from the grid, from the substation. So when there is excess energy on the grid, because say it's the middle of the night, energy demand is very low, but maybe it's very windy and there's lots of energy being produced by wind, or then there has to be somewhere for that energy to go. Otherwise, they have to pay wind operators to switch off the turbines. So it takes in excess energy when it's not needed. It stores it and it feeds it back into the grid for when it is needed. For those evenings where everyone comes home from work and switches everything on, and maybe there's not enough power being supplied, the storage helps to ensure that the grid can run efficiently and effectively and balances out the peaks and troughs in demand and supply.
Thank you. And finally,
No, all right.
is there a,
No.
do you,
Is this a big question? Because it's Councillor Buckmaster has been waiting to ask a question too.
apologies, Councillor Buckmaster. The last question was, is part of your calculation anticipating increased demand? Because there are all sorts of things that are increasing demand for electricity.
Yes, so the need for storage is growing because as we transition, as the energy supply changes and it becomes more reliant on intermittent renewable energy, then the grid has more challenges in terms of balancing supply and demand because the sun doesn't shine when you always want it to, etc. It operates very differently to coal and gas-fired stations that just provide a steady source of supply. So the demand for storage is growing because the power supply is more reliant on intermittent sources of energy.
Now, Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you, Chair. Your plan showed a drainage basin,
Yes.
which we were told it would take off I think the excess surface water that would then lead into local water courses. But obviously, in the event of a fire, any water used will be contaminated. Will what plans have you got to stop that contaminated water from entering the local water courses?
So as part of the drainage scheme, there would be a penstock valve at the end of the drainage basin where it connects into the water course. So there's the ability to switch off effectively, switch that off so that it can't transmit into the water course. So that's a fairly standard means of pollution control, and it means that you can then capture the water there and take it away.
So I just add one extra point. The water for firefighting that's provided by the tanks and obviously the hydrant supply that's in there, that is mainly designed due to the style of firefighting that would take place, is that would be boundary cooling only. So in terms of the NFCC guidance from the National Fire Chiefs Council, that actual, if there was a fire related, that would be allowed to burn. And the cooling water from the tanks of what's supplied into that site would be, if you like, used as sprays to protect any radiated heat going sideways. So in terms of the level of contamination, that would be different if you applied it directly onto the fire in terms of just applying it sideways onto the cooling and the unaffected containers is an awful lot less. So that then going into the penstock, as Neil was explained, then to be tested, the expectation is that will be able to be released to the watercourse quite quickly.
Thank you. It's obviously just, we have local chalk streams and obviously, they're very valued, and obviously I was concerned that water would, in a runoff, could get into our local watercourses.
I can just add one more. The engagement with Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Service was also provide premises site-specific information. So not only would they have that on the appliances prior to their arrival, we'll engage with them, and already have been engaging with them at the moment, so they will be fully trained in terms of what to do on their approach. There will be hard copies as well on entrance to the site. But one of those initial actions, if they are going to start any form of firefighting action, would be to engage the penstocks and look at the environmental impact from the start.
Just a final point on that. One of the conditions is for a detailed battery management safety plan, which would effectively enable all of that detail to be fully secured at the detailed design stage.
And I think maybe the last question, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. On the same subject, fires involving lithium ion have the potential for thermal runaway, also called thermal explosions in chemical engineering. you may have answered this. You're doing a safety audit check. And also, what are the risk of toxic fumes from that, such an occasion like that?
Yeah, to cover the probably the first point from the thermal runaway is there's a number of safety measures that would be built in by design to the standards that these batteries and then the system is actually deployed to. So there are two particular standards. There's a UL 9450, which is how it's designed and how it's made. And then there's a construction standard, which is an FPA 855 standard in terms of the whole battery management system of how it's looked after. There's a great analogy. We've probably all got phones probably sat there with us. We've probably all taken them out in warm weather, and we've had a warning on there. I'm getting too hot and I'm shutting down. Very, very simply is that all of the batteries on this system will be monitored by AI. They will have 3 or 4 different trigger points within them if temperatures start to increase. There's first of all a notification trigger that will be built in. Second trigger will look at discharging that particular cell, and it is via an individual battery cell that we're measuring rather than a whole rack or a container that's there. The second level on that other warning is that it would also discharge, so it's not going to actually receive 50%, it's going to discharge by 50%. If that temperature increase again is carrying on, it will look at discharging and shutting that down, that whole particular rack. So in terms of the stringent safety standards that it's actually designed to be built to and operated under, the battery management system that's actually going to be monitoring this and informing of any issues is quite significant. On the smoke plume that would come off a fire that would occur, the fumes. The best way probably to look at equating this is yes, there will be harmful unburnt combustion particles that come off. The best analogy I can put it to is it's very similar to a car fire. Or to a van fire. So if you've seen that particular instance in your lifetime, you'll be able to picture that to a single container. And then the travel of those particular smoke plumes is probably between about 80 and 100 meters, depending on wind direction. But there are unburnt particles of combustion.
Can I just come back? Yeah, you did say you would let fires run. I just wondered how that would affect toxic fumes. How would you curb toxic fumes if you were allowing the fire to run?
The policy.
Did I hear you right?
Sorry. Yeah, no. The policy in terms of allowing the fire to burn is minimising the quantity of other impacts. Applying water with the number of resources that you've got would take an awful lot longer because purely trying to put this out won't take place. The quickest and easiest way of being able to extinguish that fire is to allow it to burn. So you are accepting unburnt particles going up into the atmosphere and allowing that to drop down as the quickest way to resolve that incident, other than actually applying water. I'm not sure if you're...
I think if you're allowing this to run, the fire to carry on, how are you containing the toxic fumes? That was my... Am I not making myself clear here? But...
No, that it's difficult to contain that.
Oh, okay.
That is going up
Right.
into the atmosphere.
Yeah. So members
But
have
over a distance of 80 to 100 metres, of which there are no residential properties within that distance. And but the policy of allowing things to run is the policy of the National Party Council. So it's not our policy, it's how national guidance says firefighters should deal with any of these incidents nationally. But I would point out there's been one UK fire back in 2020. So it's a very rare incident in this country.
all right, members, have we all who wanted to ask a question asked a question? Right. I think I can thank you. Thanks very much. That was a lot of questions answered. So next we have Colin Berthoud. Representing Furno Pelham and Stocking Pelham, you have 3 minutes. Welcome.
Can we put it on after the?
Yes, yes, no, this was blinking. Oh. Let's see how long I've got.
Right, so it's the button on there. Yeah, got it.
Right. I will reference the diagram that was right at the beginning of the meeting with all the fun colours and so on. I sent you a letter this morning, so if you have that letter, you'll find that diagram. If not,
All right, if you could just.
yeah. I'm speaking on behalf of Stocking Pelham Parish Council. Our villages are deeply impacted by developments around the Pelham substation, so my comments reflect the views of the council and, we believe, the majority in our parish. While we support net zero infrastructure, it should be fairly distributed. As a village, we've done our part, and now planners should protect us from further developments of this type. The government says we must use up to 1% of agricultural land for net zero. If that's distributed fairly, our villagers have no issue. But imagine being told that all development would happen in East Herts, taking up half of its parks and green spaces. Walk in any direction and you'll see industrial infrastructure. The summer noise from Best cooling fans would be unbearable. You would say, not fair. The government might respond that East Herts' sunnier climate and lack of rain makes it more commercially attractive. So this is where the development should be. The map that we have shows what surrounds our village. Red marks the existing sites, the Pelham substation and the noisy Pelham Bess. Orange yellow marks approved sites like the 400 megawatt Hixham Hall Bess, one of the UK's largest, and the huge Burden Hall solar array. Pink marks the others still in planning, including this one. And green is a Crabs Green Bess, recently disallowed by East Herts. We're very grateful for that decision. Crabs Green was just 200 metres from the nearest homes and threatened more noise, more traffic, and further erosion of our rural character. Greens Farm Bess is of a similar scale and even closer to the nearest house, 160 metres from the nearest home. Though much smaller than Hixham Hall, it's far more intrusive. For those living within a kilometre, it means more low frequency hum, altered views, and thousands more, and additions to the thousands of truck movements already tied to net zero development. Developers argue proximity to substations is crucial, yet it's proven that best facilities 2 to 3 kilometres away still work commercially. This one's next to the substation. It can be 2 or 3 kilometres away. We asked this committee to acknowledge that Stocking Pelham has done enough. So with a 400 megawatt battery storage already there, solar arrays agreed near our village, we've contributed more than our fair share, and it is time for others to take the strain. Please do not approve this or any further similar developments nearby.
Thank you. Members, do we have any questions?
Could we have the map, which I would love to answer any questions you may have about?
Oh, here we are.
There it is.
Okay, Councillor Estop.
Could you describe the hum that you hear from the other one? Yes, so there's two sources of the Pelham hum, as we affectionately call it. There is the substation itself, and then there is the Stratera Bess. The Stratera Bess is very slightly closer to the village than the Pelham substation, and the two kind of seem to interact together. It gets much worse in the summer months because the Stratera Bess is working really hard to keep the batteries cooled. We heard how they can catch fire. There are fans in there to keep them cool, and they work very hard in this kind of weather.
So we hear that combined hum throughout the village. My house is about 600 meters away, the other side of Gins Road, and I can hear the hum on one side of my house. The other side of the house, the hum, it shields me. And I hear it on warm days in the evening. That's the worst time for me when we're outside.
Okay, Councillor Smith.
Hello, sir. Is it any worse from any one particular village? There's Manudon and Burden, Pelham.
Yes, it slightly depends on the wind direction. So if the wind is going the right direction, we hear it more if it's coming kind of our way. If it's going down to Burden, I suspect they hear it more. But it's a curiosity. I didn't know that sound did that, but it does seem to me to depend on the wind direction.
I don't see any more hands, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And finally, we have the ward councillor, Councillor Jeffrey Williamson, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good evening to you, members. First of all, I would ask the committee to note that those in opposition to the application would have brought along tonight someone who is well versed in the counter arguments for best projects in the rural area, such as from the Campaign for the Protection of Rural England, to speak and answer any questions the committee may have had, but regrettably that was not possible to arrange in the notice period we were given for tonight's meeting. Notwithstanding, you have heard earlier a number of arguments put forward by the local community why this application for a battery energy storage system in the proposed location is inappropriate. You have heard from both the Parish Council and from Protect the Pelhams. They are the voices of the local community, and as the ward member, I fully support the views that they have expressed. As we have seen from the map, the presence of the Pelham Electric substation on the edge of Stocking Pelham has attracted proposals for energy infrastructure like bees around a honeypot. No one is arguing against the need for renewable energy sources and the infrastructure that goes with them, but this should not be allowed to trump all other considerations. As you have heard, BESSes do not need to be positioned right next to the substation. They can be just as effective if placed some distance away, which means more suitable and less damaging sites can be found. But developers always are looking for the easiest and cheapest solutions, regardless of detrimental effect on the landscape and the local communities. Stocking Pelham is a small village and is within the rural area beyond the Greenbelt. As such, it should have protection from the creeping industrialisation that these proposals represent. Indeed, our district plan has policy GBR2 precisely to give that protection. This policy, which is designed, and I quote, to maintain the rural area beyond the Greenbelt as a valued countryside resource, unquote, states that sustainable development will be permitted provided it falls within specified categories, which are generally for developments of benefit and befitting for a rural area. And I quote further, provided that they are compatible with the character and appearance of the rural area, unquote. Therefore, the policy does not allow development that would be to its detriment. Paragraph 819 in the report says that the list of these categories is not exhaustive and other types of development can be acceptable. But I say the policy is very clear and specific on what is allowable, to the exclusion of all else. If it is the case that the policy can be interpreted in the way that it has been, it deems it to be pretty worthless. We might as well not have it. The paragraph following, 820, argues that as there is existing energy infrastructure already in the vicinity, then adding to it is in keeping with the landscape context. But this is suggesting that despite the presence of harm already inflicted on the landscape, it is okay to keep inflicting even more harm. You will recall, of course, that another BESS scheme close by at Hixham Hall was agreed by this committee in April. The scheme you are looking at tonight is even closer to homes both in East End and Stocking Pelham. You will have seen from the report that a scheme similar to this one at Crabs Lane was refused recently under Officer Delegated Powers. The Greens Farm proposal is more akin to the Crabs Lane scheme, which was refused, than to the one at Hixham Hall, which you approved. So it would be more consistent for this scheme also to be refused for the same reasons. Members of the committee have received a letter from Protect the Pelhams, and their speaker earlier provided a summary of the points it made. There is no need for me to go over these again, but the points made are relevant and strong. I would urge you please to keep all the arguments against this application that you've heard tonight foremost in your minds when coming to a view. Thank you.
Thank you. No questions? No, I think you're getting off. Got a bit lucky there, so thank you very much. Now, members, we're going to have to debate. I'm going to get a glass of water. So if you want to. Councillor Dunlop. Oh, I thought you were running out there. Wait, yeah. If the public wants some water, there's some water over there that you can help yourselves to. Right, members. Now, the report sets out the argument starting from principle of development right through to amenity and pollution and safety, but I'm quite willing to accept questions as they, or debating points as they come. Does anybody want to kick us off? Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. I find it quite interesting that the Crabs Lane application was refused quite recently, and I'm hoping I can ask this question. Can I ask how is this application different to the Crabs Lane application? Thank you.
So the way we approach the application is we consider every site on its own merits. No two sites are the same. There are differences between them all. We apply the policies against those proposals. The Crabs Lane site in a different location we felt was sort of nearer to the village. One of the big what's sort of evident as we've assessed all the other sort of applications is that it's always a balance between different considerations. There are likely to be policy conflicts in some areas. So, for instance, in this case, we've got landscape. We identified some landscape harming Crabs Lane as well. The government NPPF sets out that we should give significant weight to the benefits of the proposal, so they often need to be balanced against the harms. I think the main thing in Crabs Lane example was the harms around the noise impacts were so the noise assessment as part of the Crabs Lane development did identify that it was, there were more sensitive receptors, there were more properties that were sort of in closer proximity. The noise mitigation that the Crabs Lane development was proposing was more than this site, but still the modelling was showing that it was in some instances, sort of the background noise levels were going to be exceeded. We were particularly mindful about the sort of low frequency noise as well. So we were, we looked at that closely. The environmental health officer did closely, and we felt that the noise impacts there were worse than this site, and that when we considered that in the balance, that it would outweigh the harms. I suppose we looked at the harms as well. We were conscious that noise impacts are perhaps felt in a more kind of harmful way by a smaller number of properties compared to, say, some other impacts like landscape, where it's more, there's perhaps less impact individually, but more people would sort of experience it. And so we felt that we do have to be sensitive to that. It's not fair to sort of put all the public benefit against significant harms to, a smaller number of properties. So in that case, which was why we sort of reached the decision we did really. We felt the balance tipped against granting that application.
Councillor Stowe and then Councillor Estop.
Was it hard choicing, was it? First of all, I must say I'm pleased to see the decommissioning bond, which we mentioned last time, and you said you couldn't do it. So I'm pleased about that. But my point is on this contamination of water, and we say particles as well now. So if there was a fire, and I know that not happening all the time, and suppose when it was in the time of the year where the continuation pond was full to the brim, and then we turned off the old tap to put it going out into the watercourse, fine. But the water they're using to perhaps cool down the fire or whatever, it's got to go somewhere. And if the pond's going to overflow, it'll come off the site. So not only will we have particle contamination of the fields around, but we'll have contamination of the water as well. And that, in my mind, makes the farmland unusable. And does that mean then they can use that land for more battery storage?
Well, just dealing with the point of could they use the land for more battery storage, that would need planning permission. We'd assess that. Well, there may be other, it wouldn't necessarily mean that if that situation arose that the only solution is building battery storage. It might be, there might be other options.
I'm being wee facetious, you know that.
But I do think
what I'm saying is the land is spoiled, growing. Shouldn't we be thinking about how we deal with that on this rare occasion we might get a fire?
So yeah, I think that concerns have been raised about, that if a large amount of water is required for firefighting, and then that, where does that go, and will that need to be sort of tankered away, and how will the tankers get to the site when the fire brigade is also trying to put the fire out? I think we've heard that the firefighting techniques have moved on since that point, and I think in the one instance of the fire, the sort of Liverpool fire that's mentioned, that was a sort of the first case of how to fight a fire, and that because the sort of techniques used were different, it resulted in a lot of water being used. But we're talking probably less water now. In terms of the water on site, so the National Fire Chief's guidance sets out a sort of amount of water that can be, is expected to be needed for an event. So this is so that's stored on site, ready to use, and the drainage basins are designed to sort of accommodate that amount of water as well. I mean, I suppose there's unpredictabilities about how much water might be in it already, but it's likely that the amount of water required that guidance recommends can be accommodated.
Can I answer some of that question? I think in the report, and when the applicant was speaking, it said it would fill up to a certain level, and then there would be some drain into the water courses if in the normal course of rain.
Sorry, Chair, but what he said, they can turn the tap off that sends the water into the water course.
Yeah.
But if the attenuation pond is already high, then it can't go that way, can it?
But wouldn't it be continuously draining?
No,
until
they said they'd turn it off.
Well, then if they turned it off, they would have that little bit extra of the basin.
Well, if it's deep
perhaps.
enough, yeah.
I suppose would it be like closing the overflow on a sink?
Yeah, there will be sufficient capacity to accommodate what's there. I mean, there's no accounting for every eventuality, but I think one of the other factors is that so quite often what would happen if the water was used for firefighting is you retain it on site and then test it for contaminants, and then it would be released if it's not contaminated. So the firefighting techniques that are now proposed in terms of the sort of the boundary cooling means you cool the units that are not on fire, and so the risk of contamination is less with that technique rather than putting water directly onto the fire when it's more likely to get contaminated.
The other thing I noticed, sorry, Chair, was that there will be a water hydrant on the site. So it's not just water from those tanks, it's also a fire hydrant as well on the site. It's in the report.
Well, it will have a water supply, And because the issue in the area is that the low pressure, there's low pressure, so there's a question mark of whether the water can be supplied to at the required sort of pressure to fight a fire, which is why the alternative is you have the water stored on site ready to use, so that you don't require you're not reliant on the issues of the water pressure. So how I think the fire rescue service comment is there should be fire hydrants, but the applicant proposal is for a different technique, which is similar to the other developments in terms of the on-site storage. But there will need to be a water supply to top that up, whether it's via a fire hydrant, I think is not necessarily known at this point.
So I've got Councillor Estop and then Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to just have a look at the wider picture, bigger picture of sustainable energy. We do understand, I understand that applications like this have to be looked at on their merits, as the officer has told us. And we understand that we can't refuse something if we believe there's a better location. And we can't consider the need. That's in the report. But we understand clearly that there is a need, a growing need for this battery storage kind of use. But the benefits of this, they're not going to be local. They're not necessarily going to be just East Herts. The benefits are more strategic, more regional, beyond our normal. So that's one thing. Our role is, as we heard from an objector, our role is to protect environment, but our role is also to enable economic development. So there's a tension with this. And I just feel aware that, I mean, we can see it here. There's such a lot of development related to energy. This kind of development is becoming really the most significant threat to the countryside. It's not housing, it's this kind of development. And there elsewhere in the country, there are other things relating to computing and data that will be coming along. So I was disappointed that in the report, there are no comments specifically from our policy team, the council's policy team, about how this relates to strategy and policy. And I'm aware that we don't have a locational strategy or any guidance about development related to sustainable energy and low carbon. We understand that developments like this could be 2 to 3 kilometers away from a substation. We are having to deal here with essentially a speculative development. It's a little bit like speculative housing when our 5-year land supply goes down. And it seems a lot of pressure for something that's very important. This is something that seems to me should be part of the call for sites, and it should be something that is part of the revised local plan, where there can be a strategy and locations for anticipated needs because of the significance of them. I know that now we're faced with this particular application, but I wonder if the officer could say something about the lack of a policy input into this in the report.
Well, we have on page 26 a breakdown of the main policy issues that are then looked at in the discussion of the report, and that includes I think quite a lot of stuff that you said was missing, but I'll let the officer.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the policies, it's as the policy background is as set out in the report. We've got the National Planning Policy Framework, which sets out the broad, higher level policy with regard to this type of development, and then our district plan also has policies, for instance, policy CC3 regarding renewable energy, policy GBR2 is also relevant here because the site's in the rural area beyond the green belt. So yeah, I mean, that's as set out in the report. In terms of the, you know, the absence of a more clearer guidance or sort of local level guidance on the location of renewable energy. Yeah, that we, you know, currently the council doesn't have any such policies. It's the relevant policies are, you know, for instance, policy CC3 is it's a general policy that needs to be applied on a site by site basis, which is what we're doing in Stocking Pelham, and appreciate that, you know, there are a lot of concerns about the cumulative development in that area, but that doesn't, and you know, we see on the plan all the different proposals in the site, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're all going to happen. As we've seen, you know, some have been committed, you know, the yellow ones. There are others that have been refused at various stages of the planning process. For instance, the purple site, the planning inspectorate has dismissed an appeal for that, for development at that site. So, you know, we don't know how they would look at this current application, but the application is definitely going to have to kind of persuade another inspector to go, you know, to take a different view to that original view. So that could be a challenge. And we've looked at the Crabs Lane example. Application has been refused. We haven't received an appeal as yet. Applicants do have a right of appeal, so it could come in. But you know, so you know, it's a mixed picture. They're not all going to be approved, or you know, all going to happen necessarily. So we just have to kind of approach them on a case by case basis and assess what the harms are, what the benefits are, and come to a decision. Going forward in the future, the council may choose to kind of, you know, as it's developing its emerging plan, might choose to have some policies in that new plan about where this type of development should go, perhaps some evidence base about, you know, where lots has happened, and maybe it's, you know, that's enough, and maybe there are other areas more suitable. That's something perhaps for the policy team to look at as they develop that emerging plan. But you know, we don't have that those sort of policies at the moment, so we have to do it on a site by site basis.
So, yeah, it has to be case by case. It feels a bit speculative, feels a bit ad hoc. I really do urge, I mean, we can't do it here, but I think it's absolutely necessary that the local plan has some kind of strategy relating to this in coordination with adjoining districts. I hope that, I mean, I don't know whether the call for sites has any land that was being suggested for these kind of uses. That's a question that others have to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think this site is peculiar in that it's the substation sits right on the border between two planning authorities as well, which adds an extra layer of complexity. I'm aware that next is Councillor Smith and then Councillor Copley.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny you should say the border issue. I'm wondering if this location was chosen because of that. You've got a massive solar energy plant, solar array on one side, which is Uttlesfield.
I'm almost certain it's, and as the applicant said, it's the connection point to the grid.
Yeah, exactly. So then we're committed to supplying that array. That wasn't really my question, actually. It was only to follow up what you said. I was just wondering about the batteries themselves, whether there was enough consideration for the manufacturing, decommissioning of battery uses after battery units after use, because they have a limited life cycle. I know it was mentioned by Councillor Dunlop, and we know that the more they're charged over time, the less efficient they are. So they become pretty much inefficient.
Yeah, is there a decommissioning? I mean, we've seen there's decommissioning of the site, but is there anything on the decommissioning of the batteries, individual battery units?
So, I mean, yeah, we've heard from the speaker about that there are other regulations that deal with the kind of the manufacture of these units, and as part of the planning system, we can't duplicate those regulatory regimes. So we have to look at it only in terms of the material planning consideration. So applicants have provided some information about the units that they're potentially going to use, but this is kind of background information that can change as they get planning permission and then move to, if they do get planning permission, and then then they work on implementing the scheme. In terms of decommissioning, yes, we do have a planning condition about the decommissioning of the site. We don't know what would happen to those batteries as they get removed from the site, but there will be, I don't know for sure, but I'm sure the government and other regulatory bodies will be requiring they'll be having regulations in terms of recycling and disposal of those units, but it's not something we can consider really as part of this planning application.
Yeah, I think that's a timely reminder that we need to focus only on what are material planning considerations. Councillor Copley.
Thank
And
you.
then-
So I think the officer has just already said about we can't look at whether these are being fairly distributed. That's obviously not a planning ground, but I'm just wondering whether we can look at ones that are already in place, and obviously the ones we're looking to improve, and see whether any of the factors are kind of multiplied. I'm particularly thinking of the noise. I mean, obviously there is some noise already. We've got our further noise readings, which were on that slide. But, I mean, does that take account of any cumulative effect, and should we take account of the cumulative effect? I was also interested to know what actually those different noise levels sounded like. I mean, it sounds like more like a vacuum cleaner than an aeroplane, but I'm, not au fait with all the decibels. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a sort of low, so the low frequency noise is kind of like a sort of hum it is a bit intermittent when I've been on the site. The battery storage will suddenly start up and then you get a noticeable hum. You also get different noise from, say, the transformer units, which is more of the sort of humming noise, and then the air conditioning units within the units will that's perhaps more more like mechanical ventilation noise that you can.
That does sound like very irritating if it's like constant noise. I mean, do we take account of that as well? How, the fact that obviously these are the levels, but if it's constantly there.
Yeah, I think as so in terms of the cumulative impact, so now that site's up and running, the current development, so when developers now do their noise assessments, that's feeding into the background level. So it's difficult to know what the background level would be without it being there. Although there are other studies that are available showing other background noise studies that show what it was, take measurements before it was there. So I think our environmental health colleagues have been, using, that kind of data as well. So in terms of the type of noise, there are various different ways of assessing that as well. I think so. There's the standard BS 4142, I think, noise assessment criteria for assessing noise, but there's also other ways you can assess it. I think there's a kind of measurement. I think it's called a NANAR 45 measure. It's all quite technical, and environmental health colleagues are the kind of experts on it. But so we've looked at those as well as part of the development. So that give you a sort of a picture, a wider picture of kind of the potential harm. So, I mean, in the case of this application, the noise assessment does look at the general noise, potential noise, and then the low frequency as well. So 100 hertz, 200 hertz frequency ranges, so lower frequency. And then you also mentioned about the type of noise, the intermittency, there are other rules about noise assessments about how there's various sort of penalties that can be applied to a noise reading if it's a certain type of noise, like a sort of impulsive noise, or if it's of a type that might be more likely to be kind of irritating. So that's also something that the environmental health colleagues consider when they're looking at this application. And I think I can see in the noise report that penalties have been applied to some of the the readings, and then compared to the sort of background level. But it still complies, still below background level, even with those penalties applied.
Thank you.
Right, so Councillor Dunlop, and then you.
Just sort of following on that subject, do we know what temperature of the day was whenever that simulation is done? Because it sounds as if at different temperatures, ambient temperatures, you get different sound levels. So is that a typical winter day, well, there isn't a typical summer day anymore, except just hot?
Apologies, I don't, at the top of my head, I don't know the exact sort of the exact timings for the noise assessment, but it would need to be over a period to give a figure over, say, 24 hours or something like that. And we would look at that when that was taken. That would be assessed as part of the environmental health officers to make sure that gives a reasonable representation of what noise levels are. I think one of the reasons why this application and the Crampton Lane one had been in a long time and not been took before they got determined was that some of the noise information was using surveys during the sort of COVID lockdown period, when the background levels were even sort of lower because there are no flights, and so that was required to be redone as well to give a more sort of accurate representation.
I sort of feel that without knowing the load that's being exerted on the cooling system and therefore the sound that it's producing, it's fairly meaningless then. Well,
the noise report does consider the different kind of levels that the developments are running at. So there's different. So in the noise report, there's a assessment with running at 60% of the batteries and the cooling running at 60% and 80%. So it gives then a worst case. It's based on there's a measure based on the worst case scenario, and in that scenario, it was still below background noise levels during the day, but there was some small exceedances at night time. But then if you consider the kind of noise attenuation from the windows of a house, it would be below the background noise level.
Is that point 4.17 on page 50? I think, well, this is where the members, from page 49, 4.14 through to 4.18 are where in the report, the sound pollution or noise pollution or whatever we call it is discussed. And I think it covers some of Steve's answers as well. Anyway, Councillor Estott.
Sorry,
did you want to come back on?
Well, it's not about sound, it's about something else.
I've just got one.
Well, then I'll let Councillor
sound,
Estott go, and then I'll
anyway,
come back to you.
I just wondered, background noise, where does that figure on the chart? And the noise that we're thinking about, how does it compare to something like an A road that is sort of in a fairly near vicinity?
So in terms of the sort of the noise levels. In terms of the noise levels, so the background noise level readings are generally around sort of 20 to 30 decibels at night time in the area, which is pretty low. And then it can be sort of higher during the day, ranging up to sort of 30 to 50. I mean, the 20 to 30 decibels is compared to other areas in the district, it's very low background noise level. So that makes in order for the development to be below the background noise levels is quite challenging for them. So, but in this case, they're still able to do it with the 3.5 meter acoustic fence still below background noise levels. In terms of kind of what, there is a table in the noise report where it sort of describes the different types of kind of noise levels, and I think the A roads are something like 60 decibels, you know, 60 plus. I think the noise report said something like 50 decibels is sort of 40 to 50 could be the noise level within an office. 30 to 40 could be a living room during the day. Yeah, I mean, but I suppose, you know, if there were significant noise generators in the area, that would raise the background level. It would probably make it easier for the development to sort of to fit in. But they're still able to, given the location and the level of separation, still able to do that in this case. Obviously, the Crabs Lane example wasn't able to.
Councillor Estop. Nope. Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you. On that point, actually on page 63, it says the noise impact assessment was produced in February 2024. So it would have been during the cold months when fans weren't running to keep them cooler.
But would it have been using a simulation with
Yeah. Sorry. So yeah, just the noise report is from the noise report's from the 27th of February 2024, and as part of the they have to say where they did the test from, when and what time. So it says noise measurement position 1, located in the wooded area to the southeast of the site between 10:30 on Friday 23rd of June to 11 on Tuesday 27th of June in free field conditions. Noise sources at the measurement position comprised of distant road traffic noise and intermittent aircraft flyovers associated with Stansted Airport and birdsong. And then there's noise measurement position 2, located in a wooded area immediately south of the closest property off Crabs Lane between 10:45 on Friday 27th of June to 10:30 on Tuesday 27th of June. I think the date might be wrong there, but in a free field conditions, noise sources at the measurement position comprise distant road traffic noise, flyovers from Stansted Airport, and again and so on. So yeah, they were carried out in June. In terms of it's not going to take into account the kind of the turning off and on of the noise from this development, because it hasn't happened yet. So the noise report models what it could be in terms of, you know, say 60, what would the noise output be when it was 60% or 80%?
Sorry, John, I was going to come back to you, wasn't it? Not Councillor Estop. I'll go back to you, then I'll go to Councillor Stowe.
Yeah, it's not noise this time. It's my usual one. Agricultural land. I noticed that in section 8.24,
Councillor Dunlop, Councillor Stowe, were you going to go back to? No, can I bring in Councillor Stowe first, and then we'll go on to that.
All I was going to ask, actually, have we any idea how far away the M11 is from this site? Because one of our access roads, I believe, goes down to it, doesn't it? I can't remember. I didn't go that way. I didn't look at it. What I'm saying is that the motorway runs all night and all day, and it's quite a large background noise, and you can hear it more than likely a mile away. And I just wondered, give it some sort of perspective in that, you know, where that motorway was.
Yeah, so I haven't measured it, but I have cycled the route from Audley End Station to the site, and it took me, and I cycle about 12 miles an hour average, and it took me about 40 minutes. So it's sort of probably between 5 and 10 miles, but no, you wouldn't. I know from cycling out of Audley End Station and up the hill away from the M11 that once you sort of drop down the valley the other side into Arkersden, you don't really hear the M11 anymore, which was probably a distance of, I don't know, a mile or something. So yeah, I don't think the M11 is influencing the noise assessment.
All right, Councillor Dunlop.
Thank you. I noticed in section 8.24 it mentions about the loss of agricultural land. and that there is harm arising from this, and suggests that the harm is tempered by the size of the site and that will be for a limited period only. I understand the size of the site, but the limited period only doesn't really make any sense to me, because people still need to eat during the period of time where the agricultural land is lost. So I was wondering whether we could remove that tempering.
Well, in terms of the approach on agricultural land, we've adopted how we see inspectors approaching the issue in other appeal decisions, and they have tempered the weight because of its a 40-year time period for development. So, you know, if it was residential, that land would be likely to be lost from agriculture for, you know, forever, or, you know, well over 100 years probably. So it's different. 40 years is different to that. So I think it is appropriate to give it you know, to treat it slightly differently. I mean, all I can say is, you know, that's the approach we see in the inspector's decisions. They have reduced the weight of harm on that issue.
I appreciate that's the view they take, but obviously if you lose agricultural land, you lose food. How can you say it's tempered by that whenever you've got 40 years with reduced amount of food?
And can I bring in a point about I know it says it's normally not considered a major harm unless it's 20 hectares, is that right?
Yeah, so the development management procedure order has a consultation requirement for consulting Natural England for if the development results in loss of more than 20 hectares, which it calls, and it phrases it significant loss of agricultural land. So whilst I appreciate it's not exactly the same, we've seen in the other appeal decisions, inspectors have used that rationale for what constitutes the scale of loss that would constitute a kind of significant loss of agricultural land. And also the weight as well that the inspectors give for, you know, we haven't seen an example for these types of development where inspectors give them more than limited weight for in terms of harm for loss of agricultural land. So, you know, I think we'd find it very difficult to argue that the harm is any more than that, really, given the kind of the general approach that inspectors seem to take.
Yeah, I understand from an inspectorate point of view, but it's completely illogical.
Can I ask if any members have got questions regards to the landscape issues? And I saw Councillor Estott and then Councillor Copley both jump, but Councillor Estott was first, I think. Well, Councillor Copley, I think Councillor Estott's given.
Thank you. No, I thought that was a really good point about the landscape impact, because I know we've given it a moderate to minor impact, but it did look quite considerable when we were looking at the photos, and I just wondered if officers could outline for everybody again why we've come with the moderate minor impact of it, please.
So I think the landscape assessment is based on a number of different sort of different aspects of, you know, kind of the landscape. So I think we identified, you know, the highest level of harm for impact on the site itself. So, you know, when you're standing right next to the site, you've got a clear view of it. It's a field at the moment, and then it's going to become a battery storage site. So that is having a big impact in terms of that kind of, you know, the landscape character of the site itself. But then we also have to look at the kind of the wider context, the wider landscape context. And so part of that is about you know, how visible is it? So the sort of the visual effects. So looking at the different views, and the site is less visible in, well, our view was it's less visible in some of those other kind of further longer distance views, because, you know, you've got the existing kind of hedgerows that generally mark the site in those longer views. Appreciate you can go right up to the site on the public footpath, but when you're further away, there will be hedgerows in the way. There'll be planting, you know, new landscape planting, which will further mitigate the visual impact. So we felt that in the kind of the visual effects are not are kind of less than the effect of the landscape character of the site itself. And then there's also the sort of landscape character in terms of the not just what you see, but the kind of the character of the area in its its whole in its sort of totality. And then for instance, we've been looking at we've heard about the cumulative impact of all these other developments as well. So that is not just what you see from a single view, but what you would experience as you move through the space as on the footpath. You might see the development with something in the background. In this case, I don't think you would see this development with other proposed developments in the background other than the substation, but but there would be those sequential views, as we've heard, as you walk along a route, you'd see one and then you'd see another. So that's part of the landscape character. So some of those kind of issues are less harmful than others. I think in terms of the so we tried to sort of summarize it a bit in terms of the landscape character itself. We've come in with a range of moderate to minor. That also vary because there's variation between like as the site changes, as the landscaping matures, so the effects would reduce. You
want to come back?
No, thank you. I mean, if there was anything we could do to obviously reduce that, walking along and you see one then the other, but I'm not sure what else we can do in terms of the landscaping. I mean, that's just my concern.
Yeah, I suppose sort of the main thing we can do is in terms of the landscaping scheme for the site itself. I'm sure when you're on the public footpath, you still will appreciate the development behind, even if the landscaping becomes fully mature. I think you'd still get an appreciation that it's there, but it would lessen it a bit. Could lessen it a lot when that landscaping matures. And just to be, and I suppose this is the second application for the battery storage that's come forward in East Hart. So as more schemes become consented, if this scheme does become, if it was approved, then it would then become a consented scheme. So you'd have to give that a lot greater consideration in terms of the cumulative impact. So then when that's looked at as part of other applications, then the potential cumulative impact is more.
Councillor Estop, and then.
In terms of protecting existing character and amenity, really all we just have acoustic barrier and landscape, and that's what we have to make sure is as good as possible. Despite being surrounded by other ugly substation pylons and so on, we want to make sure that this is mitigated as well as possible. You showed us the landscape proposals on screen, so we know they're there, but I've looked through the conditions, and although there's an LEMP, there doesn't seem to be a landscape design condition which talks about design details and then implementation. And more than that, we are very focused on the installation itself, but there are going to be roads, quite long roads leading to that site. And I think there needs to be a condition about the design of those roads, the design and landscape, down to the paving actually, for the roadways. It feels that should be seen as part of the landscape mitigation. That should be covered by condition.
Is one of the roads temporary, or is it the road that's heading west for the HGVs? Is that a temporary surface? And then the existing ones, are they going to be just perhaps for the light vehicles, they're going to be using the existing surface and perhaps beefing it up in some. So I don't think there's going to be new road surfacing as such.
Yeah, that's right. They won't be hard surfaced. There'll be a sort of like a gravel type construction. Even the operational access road would be a sort of gravel it wouldn't be hard surface. So I think the intention, what would be appropriate, I suppose, is what an agricultural road would look like for servicing a farm, I suppose. And it would look quite similar to that.
And then could you clarify about the condition on landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so the landscape environmental management plan condition, we normally consider that to be, sufficient to secure. I mean, there are approved landscape plans as well, but we normally consider this to be sufficient to include all the landscape details, because it is quite specific. So, for instance, Part H of Condition 17, details of species and mixes selected to achieve target habitat conditions. So it does require, planting plan level detail, but then it's also more than that, because it's detail about how it would be managed in the longer term as well.
It is essentially an environmental and sort of biodiversity management thing. It's not design. I think that we have to have the landscape design covered.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, do you think there are up to, there's 80K on those? Could we have something on the explicit on the landscape visual impact?
I suppose there's different. Sorry, I was just sort of coming back on that, the landscape environmental management plan condition.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a kind of standard wording that we normally include, but I mean, if members, I believe there are also other landscape conditions listed at the back, but the condition gives a chance to submit new details or us to kind of request new details. But I mean, if members felt that the wording of the condition should be changed, or that there should be a separate condition to require, details of landscaping to be submitted, then that would still be, some perfectly sort of, that could be still meet the sort of condition tests.
Yeah, I understand the thrust of it's about how that landscape visual impact.
Yes, I think the thing is, I think it'd be very helpful if we had what the officer suggested. The thing is that in the LEMP, the reason for the condition is to protect protected species and habitats. We need to have a condition that the reason is to protect the character of the area, and that's the thing that we've heard about, and that's the thing that I want to make sure we're doing.
Do you think we could just change some wording?
Chair, I think the point that Steve's been speaking a long time today. I think the point Steve's making is we have, as I understand it, Steve, we have a landscape plan with details about species, mix, etc. And you've seen indicatively that on the slide. So we don't have, therefore, because we've got that drawing already, if members are so minded, it's in the list of approved plans. So we're approving a landscape design now. So we don't need another planning condition that asks for the same thing. I think the point Steve is making is that the condition 17 builds on that. And that's clear from the reason when it talks about establishment and maintenance of a reasonable standard of landscaping in accordance with policy. So I think our view would be it's dealt with explicitly through the grant of planning permission, if members are minded, through the approved plans condition. So we don't need to replicate it.
That's very helpful. It's very helpful. Except in most applications like housing developments where it's approved, we still have a condition saying do it, and if some things die within a couple of years, replace them. That's the sort of standard kind of thing that we might expect.
I think that's dealt with in condition 22, isn't it? Is that, am I reading that right?
Yeah. That's retained.
So I think the point you're making, Councillor Estrop, is does there need to be an additional wording in condition 17 that talks about in the event that, you know, the landscaping is implemented and trees die within a certain amount of time, X, Y, and Z happens. I think that's fair. We can add to condition 17.
Okay, well, shall we come back to that and just make sure we get the wording right before we go to the vote, if that would be all right? Now, I've got Councillor Stowe and then Councillor Connolly.
All it was, could you give us a bit more detail about this 3.5 metre tall acoustic barrier? What's it made of? What colour it's going to be? You know, is it going to last 40 years? In other words, it's quite important, isn't it? Because, you know, we don't know whether they're going to, in 30 years' time, if part of it falls down, we want it replaced.
Yeah, I mean, they're typically made of timber. There is although we do have a condition requiring details of the acoustic boundary treatment to be submitted. Condition 19. Yeah. Condition 19 requires submission of details of the boundary tree, of the acoustic barrier.
The only point I make, of course, is that if it's timber, it'll be brown or white or whatever. But, you know, perhaps a better colour might be better behind the landscaping to sort of make it melt away but do its job.
Yeah, it would be helpful just to just for members to get an idea of what these typically are. What would we expect an acoustic barrier to be?
They're generally the sort of thing you see when you're driving along a motorway and it's near a housing development, and there'll be a large kind of you know, very solid looking timber fence, not the sort of one you'll see you know, back garden fence. It's generally a lot more substantial than that and higher quite often. But I mean, in this case, it will be 3.5 meters.
And would the maintenance of that be part of the covered by that condition?
Yeah, condition 19 does say it should be for it's got to be retained for the lifetime of the development. So if it falls down, then it would need to be put back up.
Well, there's a good example actually on the A1 about Stevenage. They've built some houses and they've got this god awful barrier that blocks the houses from the road, but it's more than 3.5 meters, I'd thought. It's really tall, isn't it? But that's sort of black, I think, isn't it? I seem to remember it's black, which is not really the right.
Remember it. Anyway, are you happy with that answer? Or can I move on to Councillor Connolly? Councillor Connolly.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sticking on the same theme of partly the acoustic barriers, but also the internal site treatments. My question, I think, is what's the difference between first use and energised? So the background is we've got another facility locally that hasn't had these fences, panels and conditioned treatments put in. In fact, we've got a electrical substation in Hertford that had a conditioned barriers that were never put in as well. So this industry has previous on not installing these facilities. So I kind of want to understand what first use means, what energising means. Could it be months of them commissioning and operating where they still haven't put it in to save money? So how can we be absolutely sure that they put it in before they start making noise?
Well, I think there's probably not much. I mean, I can't really see a difference between first use and energised, unless energised has another meaning in terms of the kind of the national grid. But in terms of first use, I would, you know, that normally I would see that as meaning, you know, when energy starts to flow backwards and forwards between the
and that's
site
my point, that it could be making noise before then, because first use will be when they first start exchanging energy with UK Power Networks. Before then could be many months of testing of fans and running it in a trial form, and not necessarily transferring the energy to the UK Power Networks, but transferring it to something else. they've got to test it to make it safe, yes, and that's going to potentially create noise.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, testing could occur, but that could well be the sort of thing that that's kind of falling within the construction phase, really, and then we don't typically have controls on noise levels during construction for these sites.
Should we?
I think it's sort of covered by environmental health legislation, but some activity is very noisy, and that generally doesn't. It's not something we can control.
I think my fear is on a site like this that the construction phase ends and then we get weeks or months of commissioning, and construction actually is long gone, and then the will to start to install fences and panels and stuff has gone. Those contractors are gone, and it's how we can firm up the installation, because we've seen a failure close by that's already affecting these residents. Not in our control, but it's happened.
Yeah.
On housing developments, we always say this has got to be done before the first occupation. So why can't we say the landscaping and the 3.5 metre is actually installed once they've actually placed the batteries in place and it's all done? They can put it up, can't they? We don't want them testing it before it, because once that happens,
Yeah, I think we're talking about condition 19 as your concern, Councillor Connolly, unless there's condition 20. I think we can perhaps look to build in some wording around the trigger points for that. We need to be careful that they're reasonable, necessary, and meet all the standard conditions, but test conditions. But if that's a concern, then we could build some wording into that. I'm reluctant to do that on the hoof now, because we need just to think about that and the trigger points.
Yeah, we could put a bit more clarity as to. Sorry, yeah, we could put a bit more clarity in there, perhaps, about exactly what first use is.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody want to discuss the construction traffic management plan? And I'm seeing Councillor Copley nodding enthusiastically.
Yeah, so I'm glad we do obviously have a construction management plan in place. I was just noting that we obviously are talking about the times to avoid obviously the most local school, but I think I read that the construction traffic could potentially be going through other villages and past other schools, and I just wanted to make sure we clarified that it wouldn't be going past any of them as well within kind of school hours. It's not that they set off and they go past a whole load of other schools, and then just by the time they get to the nearest one, we're outside of those time zones, but actually there's been a safety issue going past any other schools.
Yeah, I mean, I think the wording as it is intended to manage that school in particular. It's that bullet point where it says the hours of operation and hours of all construction vehicle movements, with a commitment to all HGVs visiting the site to between 9:30 and 09:30 and 14:30. So that is see, as you get further from the site, then that's going to become harder to manage. So I think,
yeah, I do appreciate that. It's just that I know in my ward we've had quite a number of issues with construction vehicles going past schools which are not actually right next to the site, but there's been some very near misses with children, and I'm just a bit concerned.
I mean, what's the sort of time of travel to either the motorway or the A road?
I would estimate about half an hour. I suppose they would, depends on traffic, but they would need to follow that route. Yeah, I mean, I think there isn't. We're talking about the width of the route, the length of the route between Stocking Pelham and the M11, or the A120, I suppose. So, so I mean, it's probably difficult to go much beyond what we've already wording and to sort of prevent that. Really, it's easier to manage for Stocking Pelham because that's right next to the site, so we can set the times. We know that they'll, that will kind of, it can work because it's only a short travel distance. But the further it is, it's going to be very difficult to do.
If we can't put anything further in place, perhaps the applicant could just keep in mind that if we approve this, maybe the construction vehicles might just not go near schools.
Could that be an
informative?
informative? Anybody else on anything we've missed? Are we, Councillor Smith?
We've not mentioned air quality, but I know there's a dust condition here. Whereas it's going to go on for 44 weeks, we know that. There's going to be a lot of movement, dust, all sorts of things for locals. And the solution here is best practical means. I'm quoting from the document. Can we explain that? What is best practical means?
What page are you at to help you?
62.
62.
Well done.
I think the best practical means is within the environmental health legislation or guidance. This is a condition that's recommended by environmental health officers. I think for best practical means for the sort of measures that this would entail is things like wheel washing, so that as vehicles leave the site, you wash down the wheels so they don't track the dirt onto the highway, and also doesn't become dust and fly off into the area. It can also mean things like making sure the loads of the vehicles are covered so that you don't get dust kind of blowing off the vehicles as they travel. It can also mean things like the kind of like sprays on the construction site itself, storage of construction materials that they're covered, they're not just left open to the elements to blow around, and waste as well, soil and things like that. Those are the kind of measures that are normally covered by the best practice for construction sites.
Thanks.
Members, if anyone wants to just sort of tell me how you're thinking about this application, you're keeping your cards very close to your chest. Councillor Smith.
Excuse me. Thank you. It involves archaeology. I know there's a lot.
I can't hear you, sorry.
Sorry. Involves archaeology and what's been found on the site already. Has that been assessed? You do mention a couple of sites. Has there been test pits put in there? And if not, are you going to start that first?
So there has been a heritage statement submitted. Normally they're kind of desktop assessments that identify the potential for archaeological remains at the site, and then the sort of standard practice, if the in this case, HCC archaeology are the sort of statutory consultees, so if they think there is potential for things of interest at the site, to have a watch and brief conditions. So the applicants are required to hire a archaeologist who then kind of monitors the site as construction goes on, records what's found, and then sort of writes it up at the end into a report, which can then be kind of used. And also, if things are found as construction work goes on, then that can be sort of properly investigated. That's the sort of usual kind of process, and I think that's what's been recommended here in terms of the standard condition. In some cases, the HCC archaeology might require trial trenching to be done at the application stage, but it's not something they've recommended in this case. think their comments are.
Yeah, there's a
5.5.
there's a moat nearby, isn't there, or something?
Medieval.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, yeah. So they're recommending a archaeological field investigation, including trial trenching. This is paragraph 5.7. Mitigation measures as appropriate, and archaeological analysis of findings. So that would happen at the condition stage.
It didn't show anything like that on the map, so can't really see the impact it'll have on. What I was going to say is there's going to be lorries travelling all over the site. Now, will that be done first? Especially along the roads where the HGVs will be moving.
So yeah, I mean the relevant archaeology condition is condition 9. So and that's a pre-commencement condition as well. So no development should take place till within the proposed development site till the applicant secured the implementation of a programme of archaeological work in accordance with the written scheme of investigation. So that will be prepared by an archaeologist. So they'll sort of set out the areas that need to be protected and the areas of interest, and then they'll monitor the site during construction as well.
Thank you.
Can I ask it's just out of interest on informatives number 5, is that just says bats? Does that mean it's just telling them that there may be bats there? On page 64.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I think that's it's an abbreviation. We do have a sort of standard.
Oh, I see.
Standard wording about what to do if bats are discovered, or bat roosts are discovered at the site or anything. I think the ecological assessment suggests that there's very low probability of bat roosts, but I think that's just sort of a standard advice.
Right, Councillor Estop and then Councillor Stowe.
I'm looking at the planning balance. We are mindful of the objections that we've heard and the objections that we've read. In the planning balance, it says quite clearly that there's this overwhelming benefit. We know that there's there is going to be a program of sustainable energy rolling out, and this is the kind of plant that is needed for that. It's a fairly generalized kind of benefit, but we can't ignore that, and it meets policy. Our policy says that we will basically approve things that are that enable sustainable energy. That inclines me to accept the recommendation. In this planning balance, I find it sticks in the throat a bit to not say up front that the harms are affecting local character, landscape character, and the amenity of people that are in the area. And I think it's a bit hard to swallow that the mitigations of those harms are being listed as benefits. So, biodiversity net gain, that only becomes relevant because there has to be a load of mitigation for the impact. But notwithstanding that, I think the benefit in long-term strategic terms is clear, and I would support this recommendation.
Councillor Stowe.
On page 65, on 10, you put about the watercourses of the authority. In this case, it's East Hertfordshire County Council. I'm sure that should be Herts County Council.
Yes, that does sound wrong, but if you've got a paragraph, if you've got a paragraph number.
10.
10?
It's an informative.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But Herts County Council look after watercourses.
Yeah, I think I think that's recommended by the LLFA, but we'll correct that.
Thank you.
On page 28. Condition 28. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was mentioned in the late representations. There was the numbering. I spotted that a couple of days ago. Thank you. Okay, so we have to make sure where it says East Hertfordshire County Council, that's Hertfordshire County Council, unless you know something we don't. And yeah. Okay, I think the debate has come to a close. I think we've covered all the main issues. So I'm willing to make a proposal that we accept the recommendation, and I propose we vote to approve. Do I have a seconder? Including the conditions that we went over, the slight amendment to wording on the conditions, which were,
I think it was condition 19 and condition 20.
Yeah.
That's probably mentioned. The typos as well that we picked up in the late sheet and we just talked about.
Yeah. And there was an informative regarding school timing on the construction traffic management plan. Are we happy with that? And are you happy to? Councillor Thomas is seconding it. And can I have a show of hands to approve that proposal? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, Councillor Estep, I didn't see your hand there.
No, that's fine. Councillor Thomas can be the seconder.
Yes, votes for then, please. And those against? And abstentions. So that's 12, and that's planning consent approved. And I think that's the last thing. So the meeting is closed at 9:17 p.m. Thank you.